Everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very, very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Ashley Zelinskie. Ashley is a Brooklyn-based conceptual artist employing media as vehicles in service of underlying concepts. Her works span a variety of media, from sculpture, canvas, and print works to digital art, VR, and holograms. Each artwork is created using technologies such as 3D printing, computer-guided laser cutting, satellite plating technology, and gaming engines. Her work focuses on visualizing data in abstract forms and finding new and interesting ways to describe complex ideas. Ashley's work has been featured by the New York Times, The New Yorker, Vice, Popular Science, Space.com, and Hyperallergic. Her work forms part of the permanent collection of the U.S. Department of State Art and Embassies Program, has been exhibited at Sotheby's, New York, ArtScience Museum in Singapore, and Art Center Nabi in Seoul. Ashley is a former resident of New Inc., the New Museum's Art and Technology Incubator, and the Shapeways Museum of Art and Design out of hand exhibition residency. She is currently working in coordination with NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Smithsonian, and a member of Onassis ONX XR studio in New York City. As you can see, Ashley has a breadth of incredible experiences intertwining the industries of art, STEM, STEAM, and space. And so I'm very, very excited to learn a little bit more about how Ashley found her way into this space of space art and learn about her interesting journey. So welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Wow, thank you for that introduction and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, I know when we first met and I was learning about your work, I've met people who do space art, but never in such with such a technical focus and a technical lens. And it was so fascinating to learn about our shared interests in certain technical topics. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I have to learn more about her work. And the first thing that caught my eye when you came into the Zoom room was your background. So maybe we should start with that. Could you share a little bit more about your Zoom background? And you said it was an artwork that you made. So I'm curious, what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so this is actually my piece, Unfolding the Universe, and it's still up on Mona. So if you give a Google, you can just do Unfolding the Universe, Mona, and you can find the virtual reality experience. You can do it on your desktop, so you don't need a headset. You can do it in a headset if you want, but it's also just like browser-based VR. Um, but yeah, this was a piece that I made with the James Webb Space Telescope team. I built this in 2021, I want to say, before the telescope had launched. And so I wanted to build this piece to kind of, share what the team was doing and, reach out to people and let them know that this amazing telescope has been built and it's about to launch and we're going to get some really cool photos from it and get people excited. Um, and my practice is most of the time sculptural, but in this case, because of COVID and quarantine, I was kind of pushed more into focusing on my digital practice because all of my sculptures start out digitally first and then are produced and made to be like actual art pieces. But because there was nothing really, like no shows happening, no exhibitions happening, I was really able to like hone in on making purely digital work. And then Maggie Massetti from the Webb Telescope team reached out and she said, we're trying to get people excited about this telescope and we don't really know how. Do you have any ideas? And I was like, well, I could make a virtual reality experience. Then everybody can hang out and discuss the telescope, but have it be still quarantined. Everybody's virtual, everybody's digital. And so yeah, you can go into the space and then all of these little purple things around here are portraits of different scientists and engineers on the team. And it's all mapped, sound mapped, audio mapped. So you go in and like as you walk up to the portrait, it's interactive. So then it'll start talking. And it's an interview with me and each of the web team members. And they're talking about, what it was like working on the Webb telescope, like what part of the telescope they worked on, and interesting tidbits, interesting facts. And then we get into deeper questions where like, what do you think is out there? Why are we here? Just like personal human questions, just to draw attention to the fact that, these huge achievements and accomplishments um, in building our knowledge of our universe. It's like every human kind of has this desire to like know what's the unknown. And all these really human ideas. Like these are all people, and these people like work together and made this crazy thing happen. And just drawing attention to that, like when we all collaborate and get together, we can do great things and we can unlock the mysteries of the universe. And isn't that cool? And shouldn't we be focusing more on that?
I absolutely love that. Wow, I have to go check out the simulation or the experience after this. And
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the process behind your artwork and the skills you've built. But before we jump into that, maybe we should a little bit backtrack and go about your regular day. What do you currently do on a day-to-day basis? And I'm sure it varies, drastically based off the projects you're working on. But how does your day-to-day currently look like? And what are your biggest focuses right now?
Yeah, it's less glamorous than you'd think when I have like collectors and curators come to do studio visits with me. I'm not a painter, so I don't have a studio that's like covered in paint and there's like half finished paintings all over the place. I sit in front of a computer all day. Like I have a desk job basically. I've turned my art practice into somehow a desk job. Um, no, I do lots of Zoom meetings. I meet with like lots of fabrication studios when I'm actually doing like building physical work and not like the digital stuff is all finished and like the planning is all finished and the concept is all finished. I work with different fabrication studios, so that's cool. I really like going into big factories and seeing like giant laser cutters or like welding machines and marble milling. So I'm about to go on a month-long residency with the Digital Stone Project. Um, and they're a residency that you take your 3D model and you can send it to them and they mill it using like CNC robotic arm mills, and mill the marble down to like basically where like an assistant, if it was like a master and an apprentice situation, like back in the day making like traditional marble sculptures, the robot does all of the apprentices work and then you come in and do all like the final detail work. And so I spend a month sitting outside in a tent in Tuscany, with a little Dremel tool finishing all of my marble sculptures. So that's more interesting and that feels more like I'm an artist than my normal day to day, which is like sitting in front of my computer.
Yeah, that definitely clears up a little bit of a perspective because I know usually when we think of artists, we're always envisioning like, hands-on, very sculpture based, but you did you mentioned you transitioned a little bit more to complete digital art during COVID. Have you continued that practice of leaning more towards digital art? And I'm also asking because I feel like it's more accessible in a way where you get to spread your art to more individuals and a lot more people I think are interested in more digital experiences. So I'm curious how that shift has been pre versus post COVID for you.
Yeah, it's actually been really great. COVID was definitely the kick in the pants that I needed to start focusing on my digital arts career. Like I said, because I was making everything digitally and then I was just producing it physically. And there was very few steps that I needed to like, polish on the 3D model before it was ready for VR. Like it was just that I was like not completing the digital model. I wasn't putting color on it. I wasn't putting shaders on it. I wasn't like putting it in a virtual world. I wasn't building like backgrounds for it and so that was basically it because like I had all the sculptures. So this sculpture in the center exists as a 3D printed gold-plated sculpture. And so when I created the world, I wanted to put a sculpture in the center of it. But I already had the 3D model from physically making that sculpture. That sculpture exists physically. But I had to like, yeah, I put the gold shader on it and made it shiny and plopped it in VR, and now it's a digital artwork. Um, but yeah, I have continued to pursue my digital art career. I do like the fact that it reaches a ton of people. I just finished my piece Twin Quasar with the Whitney Museum's Art Port. So that's reached a bunch of people. They have a large network, so I was able to teach a bunch of people in the art world about gravitational lensing, which is not something that you'd ever think those two things would overlap. But um, yeah, I thought it was a really cool way. Also, VR is a great way to describe gravitational lensing, which is like a hard concept to grasp. especially like two-dimensionally or on paper in a textbook or something, having a virtual reality world that actually reflects what's going on. And you're able to like walk around the sculpture, which has a shader on it that reflects how light is warped by gravitational lensing. And so like it's really cool because you get to like experience it firsthand, walk around it, and like literally wrap your brain around how this concept works. And I think it's a really good illustration that otherwise you might not have, except if like a crazy artist is like, okay, we're gonna make an artwork about gravitational lensing.
Definitely. And I know this question might be a little bit difficult for you, but I am curious, what has been your most memorable or favorite piece of art that you've made, either digital or a, physical piece? What has been your most favorite one?
That's hard. My favorite piece that I'm making is always the one that I'm currently working on. Because I'm always trying to one up myself and make my life more difficult, like upsettingly so. Um, I just keep trying. Yeah, I just make myself, I make my life difficult. I make my life difficult. The piece that I'm working on now, I really like, because it's all spectroscopy data from mostly web. I think I'm going to stick with just web spectroscopy, but yeah, it's a generative art piece. So a generative art piece is like you write an algorithm and the computer generates the artwork. So lots of times artists are taking like a data set, a pre-existing data set, and then they write an algorithm that extrapolates off of that data set. And you can assign like, colors and shapes and whatever. It can be a 3D model, it can be whatever, but it's digitally being produced by the algorithm. Um, and one of the things that I didn't like when I started looking into generative art was that, lots of this data-based generative art is based off of data set, but as soon as the algorithm starts running, the data set becomes arbitrary because you've moved away from the data set in an arbitrary way. And so why even reference that data set to begin with, if you're just going to change it immediately? And so I was like trying to grasp the concept of how I was going to create a generative artwork that would not be arbitrary, that like the algorithm would actually mean something or the data would actually mean something. And how I landed on it was I wrote the algorithm to be randomly generating spectroscopy data in search of the data set. Instead of being the starting point is the finishing point. So it's working the opposite way. So the algorithm will be complete when it finds the specific data set that I've deemed it as its like, goal data set. And this is kind of mimicking how, we're searching for exoplanets and we're searching for life and we're searching for all of these elements on different planets. And so it's mimicking the search that scientists are doing. And then, and it's going to run basically infinitely because I've given it such wide parameters. But then also it's using the spectroscopy data in a meaningful way, like because spectroscopy is easy because it's time and light data and it's color data. So the piece is like a rainbow spectrum that changes over time. And I'm like, so none of the elements in the artwork are arbitrary at all. They're all referencing the actual data and are, you know, teaching us something about the data or like showing us something about the data that is true. Um, so that's the piece that I'm working on now. It's hard to make a piece about spectroscopy, and now you're having to teach the art world about spectroscopy, which is like already a pretty difficult science and cutting edge science as is. So that's fun. Uh, but I think my favorite piece, like the piece that like I cried when I sold it is actually this piece in gold, if the physical piece. And that's because that piece is it's 3D scans of my arm, Dr. Amber Strawn's arm, and Dr. John Mather's arm. And they're reaching into space and they're covered in the metrics that were used to build the telescope. So it's like a lacy text on the hands. And then John and Amber signed the bottom of it. So did I. So it was kind of like a collaborative piece that I made it in 2016, 17, something like that. So way, way before anybody really cared about the Webb telescope or knew about the Webb telescope. Like so many people cared, but like the general public like didn't know. So I made this piece and it kind of just sat in my studio for years. Like, nobody wanted to show it, nobody wanted to buy it because nobody knew what I was talking about or what I was referencing. And then after the first images came back, somebody bought it right away. And I was sad because I was like, it lived with me for so long and it meant so much to me. And I became so attached to it that I was sad when that one went, when that one, yeah, left the studio.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, honestly, hearing about even the process when you were first talking about the project you're working on currently, which by the way sounds very cool. I don't think I've ever met an artist who is taking such a engineering approach or bringing in all of these concepts and tying them into making, as I said in your intro, like artwork or, some sort of visual representation of understanding this complex data. I think it's just so fascinating how you're doing that. And I really want to kind of dive into that process. As an artist, I mean, I think there's like this stereotype that generally you're very focused on, the color, the visual, the more creative side, and we don't see the data that integrates within it. So I'm curious, how did you build those skills to getting that technical knowledge and understanding spectroscopy data or all these physical concepts, and being able to CAD, which I'm sure many artists do know,
Mhm.
3D modeling is a big part of art, but also, skills like coding or bringing in, creating these visual spaces digitally. I'm curious, how did you build all these skills and how do you stay up to date with all of the technical knowledge that's, changing every single day and evolving,
Yeah.
and then integrating that with art and keeping up with the art that's expanding and evolving every day? Like, how do you do it all and how did you get those skills?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because lots of artists like to make you think that they do it all by themselves and they do not. I get a lot of help. There is no way for me to do what I do and have it just be a like one-man show. Um, I try to know a little about a lot of things. Um, so like my entire science education, it's self-taught. Everything that I know about the Webb telescope, I know just from hanging out with scientists and engineers and like basically grilling them. Like I'll get on the phone with them and I'll be like, okay, cool. You are going to teach me spectroscopy today. Like, let's go, crash course. And by no means am I like, like a scientist where I couldn't do their job, obviously. But I know enough to be able to talk about how they do their job and what they're trying to achieve and how the science works, even if I can't practice it. Um, but I'm not interested in practicing it because I'm just trying to share it with more people and share the knowledge with more people. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had more time to physically put my hands on the artwork. But again, it's like if I was doing that, I'm taking time away from like creating the ideas, like meeting with the clients, like staying up to date with like the current art market, stuff like that. So it's like I do a lot of like a little over a large playing field. So I have people that help me 3D model. I know enough 3D modeling and enough different 3D modeling softwares that, yeah, could I 3D model all of my sculptures? Yeah, I could. It would take me a really long time because I'm not like a master craftsman 3D modeler, but I don't need to be. I just need to know how the tools work so that I can tell the team, okay, this is how I want you to do this, and these are the tools that I want you to use. And I know that this software does this, and I know that this software does that. Um, when I work with gaming engines, like, am I a master at Unity? No, I am not a master at Unity, but I know somebody who's a master at Unity and I know how Unity works. So I can say, this is how I want you to use Unity to make the thing that I want you to make. Um, yeah, so you can't be like a master craftsman at every single craft, and you shouldn't try to be because when you're a conceptual artist, your craft is the idea. Your craft is honing in on the idea and making sure that the concept is sound. And that's a big job already because especially when you're combining that with science, like I make it my job to know as much as I possibly can about the science before I create an artwork about the science because I want it to be accurate and reflecting what the important parts are. And yeah, I just want it to be accurate. I don't want it to be nonsense. Um, and so that's like, that means I'm reading a lot of books on all kinds of crazy like AI and I have books on, I'm doing a piece with Mike Massimino, so I'm reading his book and like, I'm reading all kinds of books on all kinds of sciences. I just like stacked around me. But I make it my job to know the science before I talk about it. So that's a full-time job. But this is the cool thing is I wanted to be a scientist as a kid, and I wanted to be an artist as a kid. And people told me you have to choose, you have to pick one. You can't be both. There's no such thing as both. And that's not true because I exist now and I say that there's both. And also I like being able to learn a different science every year and like switch, before I was doing you know, space, astronomy, astrophysics, stuff like that with the Webb Telescope team. I was doing like I went and spent a summer in at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and they were doing CRISPR. So I was learning how to use CRISPR and gene edit butterfly wings. And before that, I was like doing computer science, and all my sculptures were built out of code. And like, I'm trying to do it all. I get bored and I want to like switch sciences constantly. So yeah. But luckily space is massive. So there's a lot to learn. So I kind of sat down in the space industry for a while and haven't been bored since. So yeah.
I love that. I think it's such a good perspective to have again, because I think you come across this misconception again of, oh, there's one person who does everything, but this idea of having multiple people who are experts at different things. But then
Mhm.
again, I think your role as bringing all the pieces together and kind of being like that bigger, the person that ties everything together and has that big picture idea is so, so important. And I can tell that you're just a constant learner. Like you love to learn, you love to expose yourself to new things. And I think that's like a skill or like an ability in itself because I think it's so hard to stay up to date and to evolve your skills as technology is changing. I think even now with AI, I know so many professors or so many people in the workforce who are kind of like hesitant to like go with the changing scene of tech and they're kind of like, oh, I want to go back to like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so I think having that mindset and that ability to be flexible and to change with the evolving tech and art space is amazing. And I think it's really cool how you're constantly learning and involving all these skills together. I think you're just a very creative person. And I can tell by the way you're talking about all these artworks. It's incredible. It's a wonderful process. And as you were talking, you briefly mentioned and you touched on this, which I'd love to expand on, which is about your childhood. Like you were always wanting to be like a scientist or an artist, and you didn't know you could combine those, but you made that possible now in your career. And so I'm curious, what was your aha moment that initially made you discover this intersection between space and art? And how did you specifically enter the space industry? Because I know you mentioned how you came across space and stayed ever since. So, what was that moment that led you into the industry and helped you discover this intersection between space and art specifically?
Yeah. So growing up, yeah, I thought I was going to be a scientist. Like my family thought I was going to be a scientist. I was very good at science and got very good grades in all of my science classes, but I also did really well in art as well. And I don't know. I think like I got into RISD and I kind of just went with that. I wanted to be a little bit more creative. I hadn't really gotten a chance to like fully go for it in the same way that I wanted to. Um, but I realized while I was there that the things that I was talking about were science. Like, do a self-portrait, and I made it out of like, stacking genetic code as physical bricks and like making, yeah, I was just like, okay, I'll make my self-portrait, but it was all DNA information. And I was like, and I was like I don't know, I felt like every project was linked to science in some way. And I was like, and I wasn't sure that that was okay or if that was art or if what I was making was art. Um, and nobody else was doing that. So I was like, oh, I must be doing it wrong. Like, I'm probably doing it wrong. Um, and lots of my sculptures would like plug in or do something, or I'd like use my computer or projectors or lights or like some kind of tech. And I also didn't know if that was right and if what I was making was art. So I was unsure because there were some people that were like using like projectors and stuff like that and like, you know, digital stuff with her, but that wasn't really happening at my school at that time. I think they now have like a new media program, but I don't know. Um, but yeah, I wasn't sure what I was making was art. And so I moved to New York after school and I kept making weird science, robot, computer art stuff. Still uncertain if what I was doing was was art. And then I applied to New Inc., which was the new museum has like a tech incubator, a tech and arts incubator. And that's when I met people that were like doing stuff that I was doing, which was really cool. I started like to slowly find my people that were like making the weird technology art. Um, and like dabbling in like some science and stuff like that. And through that program, I applied. One of my advisors on that program was also on the board of the SETI Artist in Residence program. And so I applied to that and went and spent a summer out at Hat Creek Radio Observatory um, with the SETI scientists. And they took me to NASA Ames on like a little field trip. And so I got to meet scientists and engineers at NASA Ames. And that then I kind of like ran with it from there. And I from there applied to go see a launch at NASA Kennedy, and I saw the OSIRIS-REx mission launch. And while I was down there, like learning about all the cool things that were going on at NASA, everybody was like, "Have you seen the telescope at Goddard?" And I was like, "No." And so I applied to go see the telescope while it was in the clean room. And yeah, I saw it and it was gorgeous. And then I was like, and I met all the scientists and engineers on the web team. And the web team was special because like everybody feels like family, like everybody gets along, everybody's really nice. Um, and so I kind of just, yeah, stayed working with them and was really interested in what they were working on. And then did the interview process for like my VR piece and got to know each of them personally. And, now we're all locked in our houses. So like I spent hours on the phone with them, getting to know them. And now we're all buddies. Like we hang out. I was just at Goddard like a couple weeks ago, like hanging out with everybody. Um, and so it kind of like just took off from there. And the web team kind of just like felt like home. So I stayed there for a while. And, I work on other missions. I'm doing stuff with like Hubble now and astronaut Mike Massimino and like, but like now I'm in. I'm sucked in. I'm part of the family. And so I'm like staying here and gonna continue working with Webb telescope data, but also like bopping around and seeing like what other missions are going on and what other people are doing. I worked with the heliophysics department when the eclipse was happening because I made some work about the eclipse. But yeah, I really like learning about what people are doing research on at NASA. And so it's like like the well never runs dry with, inspiration. So I thank them all the time for being my muse.
It's incredible. And I think so many people who do see your art who might not be in the specific industry can really get hooked to the visual aspect of it. I know the James Webb Space Telescope images, for example, were, oh gosh, they're trending for the longest
I
time. And
know.
everyone had it in their phones as like a screensaver at some point.
Yeah.
And people became so fascinated with space, with telescopes. And it was just the magic of art is so broad. And I think we've just scratched the surface with how we can really connect people who are not in certain industries to the advancements that are happening in that space. And I think you have a really important job of communicating in a visual aspect that's more accessible to everyone of why this is important and what we're doing and what NASA is doing every day, with their budget. So I think that's a really important job and I'm just so excited to see your work continuously impacting people both in and outside of the industry. It's just I can tell that you found your niche community and I always am a strong believer that you get like where you need to be and you'll find the
Exactly.
people who have those interests as you. You're not alone. You just need to
Yeah.
find the right community. And yeah, something else I was going to mention I thought was so funny is actually my first experience with NASA was also, well, not at NASA Ames, but it was at NASA Goddard Center where I did this summer camp for all girls in middle school. It was called the Sisters Program. And I also
Oh,
saw the James Webb Space Telescope in the clean room. And that was a very magical moment for me. So I kind of had that similar parallel experience to you before. I did an internship at NASA Ames. So that was a funny comparison.
yeah.
I'm curious in your journey, did you have any obstacles? Because I know it's so easy to see all the incredible work and the connections and the network you built. You're working with an astronaut now, which is just mind-blowing, but you built this incredible career. And I think sometimes it's really hard to see someone who's a student right now, like if they're wanting to become like you in the future, it might be hard to imagine yourself doing that 5 years from now. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, did you have obstacles so far in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah. I mean, tons of obstacles. You have to really love what you do to do what I do because it's not easy. I mean, art is taking like your heart and your soul out and putting it out for people to judge. And so when it doesn't go well, it stings, when you don't get the show, when you don't get the acceptance letter, when you don't get the sale, like it's like, oh, I suck. Like me personally, I suck. Um, so yeah, it's challenging, but like as far as obstacles go, like again, like I was talking about, like I wasn't sure what I was doing was art, so that was like a big obstacle to overcome. And I think like just my genre of like digital art is still so cutting edge, and like no, people aren't really sure what to do with it yet. Like people don't still don't know what to do with me, and I think that's always going to be the case because as soon as I know what I'm doing, I move on to a new thing. So I'm like, I don't ever think I'll sit in a comfortable place where I'm not like learning a new science, learning a new technology, trying to convince people to care about that science and that technology. Um, so yeah, it's just like a constant uphill battle, but you wake up every day and I can't imagine doing anything else. So, might as well, get to work, like grind, like just do it. But yeah, as far as like students go, if you're just starting out and you want to be an artist or if you want to get into the space industry, it's little baby steps, one small thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. And like you said, when you end up, you'll eventually end up in the space that you're meant to be in with the people surrounded by the people that you're meant to be around. So it just takes a while. And I'm an old lady, so it took years and years and years and decades and yeah, to try to figure out and like cut out your little niche space. So I guess just like, determination, which seems obvious, but being resilient, like just, every time you get kicked down, getting back up because yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of it. You kind of just have to get used to the failures because there's a ton of them and they never stop. I fail every day, all the time. I get I get rejection letters all day, all the time. So yeah,
I
but
think
that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I think hearing that coming from you, someone I think a lot of people look up to, including myself, is comforting in a way because yeah, like you said, I think it's really hard to receive rejection, sometimes, and it's hard to feel like, oh, maybe this is not the right path for me when constantly are being pulled in a different direction. But I think, as you said, as long as you're being persistent and you're having that determination and this is what you really love, I think constantly finding that energy in yourself and finding that supportive community can be a big aspect to it. And like you said, everything is baby steps. It's not like you're going to become like the biggest artist or in one day, the biggest scientist or researcher in a day or even a year. It's like
Yeah.
a small step where you have to learn and grow yourself. So definitely being aware of that journey and being open to everything that's coming to you and just realizing that maybe down the line, maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, I'll be in a closer space of where I want to be in the future. So I think it's definitely an uphill battle, like you said, but hearing
Yeah.
that from you, I think is very comforting. And now that we were able to learn a little bit more about your incredible work, as well as your journey, my last and final question for you is if you could go back in time, and you just give plenty of advice right now, but if you could go back in time and give your younger self any piece of advice, it could be career related, life related, really just anything in general, what would that advice be?
Oh my God. I so wish I could too. I think what holds me back all the time, still to this day, is like my anxiety about the future and like, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? And so I think like, yeah, if I could travel back in time and sit in front of like myself as a child, I'd just be like, yo, it's gonna be okay. Like, you're gonna be fine. It's gonna be a wild ride, like, but you're gonna be okay at the end. So just do it and like try to like, temper my anxiety a little bit and just, because if I could, I would like to be able to enjoy the ride a bit more. Like, I'd like to be able to like sit back, like take a look around, be appreciative of like what I have and the journey that I've been on and like, get to actually like soak in and like live in the moment. But I'm so anxious all the time, unfortunately. So I'm just like, oh God, I'm just like always so stressed about the next thing and the next project and like will that be okay? Is that the right choice? And yeah, if I just, yeah, even today, I wish my older self would come and sit in front of me today and tell me, tell me it's going to be okay. So, but I know it is. It always is. So it's going to be fine. I don't know. It's like a self-fulfilling loop of, just being stressed out. Don't be stressed out. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine.
Think it's a very universal experience because you're constantly trying to improve and be a better version of yourself. So you're scared of kind of doing something wrong or, going backwards. I think it's like
Yeah.
a normal human fear, but I
Yeah.
definitely agree. It does sometimes take away from that experience of enjoying what you do have in the moment.
Yeah.
I definitely can relate with that. I think I have that a bit too. And I think honestly, everyone has a piece of that anxiety with them because as you achieve something, you're like, oh, now I have to do something even better or even, bigger.
Exactly. I'm never satisfied. If I had told myself like a year ago what I'd be doing today, I'd be like, yes, like we did it, like hit the jackpot. But like I sit here today and I'm like, okay, next thing, not
Exactly.
good enough, next thing.
Exactly. And I can 100% relate with that. And I'm sure everyone who's listening can as well. It's constantly like, oh, I achieved this one goal that I've had for so long. Okay, now what's the next thing?
Yeah.
And then now you're stressed again. And it's like, okay,
Yep.
I should step back and like enjoy this moment. But then also, of course, you need to stay motivated to find your next challenge or to find your next goal. But also reminding yourself to enjoy the experience and the process is so important without feeling guilty. And so that's why I love this question because I think I wish I could go back even a year ago and tell myself something. So I can't imagine 20, 30 years down the line how we'll feel about ourselves. So it's like interesting to watch back and see how we do grow. So thank you so much, Ashley, for doing this
Yeah.
interview today. I know we connected like the moment we first talked. And so this interview was honestly a very, I was fangirling the entire time. I think
Oh,
you're
thanks. I was too. I was too. I can't wait to talk to you during Space Week.
Yes, me too. When I first heard about your intersection with engineering and art, I was mind blown because I personally never considered myself an artist. But once I started learning about the work you do with CAD, I was like, hey, maybe I am an artist, but more of a digital
Oh,
way than like a physical way. And I
yeah.
just was very like fascinated with your work and what you're doing. And I know that you're going to continue to grow and build, a great fan base. And I'm already a fan of your work, so I can't wait to see some of your work in person. So thank you so much for doing this interview with
Thank
us today.
you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you.